Welcome back to the Wheel Reads and how to do stuff. So, back to the whole podcast topic. Today, we're going to be talking more about creating your own podcast and really just learning from some of the things that I have done creating my own and how maybe this can be a how-to and help video. Today's topic is going to be on choosing a topic. It's a really important thing when you decide to sit down and do a podcast. It's probably the first step. Is figuring out what are you going to talk about. Today, I'm going to kind of roadmap some of the pitfalls and do's and do nots on how to go about creating a podcast or picking a topic for a podcast. Now, let me give a little disclaimer. Am I a complete expert on podcasting? No, not at all. By all means. Have I grown a podcast tremendously over the last year and a half? Yes, I have. Done that in multiple ways, and through this series, I'm going to share a lot of the different ways of going about that. Now, choosing a topic is something that I didn't spend a lot of time doing. I just I kind of had the topic come to me and decided to do a podcast on the back end, and that's how a lot of podcasts are formed. But let's talk a little bit about creating a topic. So let's talk about why to podcast. So first, let's get into some statistics on podcasting itself. Podcast is a really rapidly growing medium of entertainment and consumption, at least here in America and actually all over the world. If you look at this graph here, this is for the US only. It shows what percentage of households listen to podcasts. This is just considered someone who has listened to a podcast within the last year. It says 55% as of 2020 are listening to podcasts. Now, 50% of U.S. homes are considered podcast fans, which means they actually are fans of a particular podcast. So where 55% have listened to one, it's only 5% less that actually a drop-off rate. So people that consume podcasts tend to keep on consuming at least one. On average, a podcast fan will listen to around 6 podcasts. Now, how many podcasts are there out there? Well, there's over 2 million of them. So that's a lot of podcasts, and that's a very saturated market. If you think about that, there's probably not that many radio stations, even in the entire America, let alone in one local area. You don't have that many on a dial. You don't have that many TV stations. It's a very saturated medium, meaning that it's really tough to get people to actually find you and listen to you. So it's important when picking a topic to find something that will resonate with people. So first, let me start with the most important thing when picking a topic. Pick something you're passionate about. A lot of people go on podcasts and they want to make money. That's not necessarily a bad goal. Podcasting is probably not the best platform for that. If you go into podcasting to quit your day job and just do podcasting full time, you're probably going to be disappointed. A lot of people will go out there and see what's the hottest, latest podcast and try to recreate it. And then they end up quitting their podcast a month in because they realize they're not generating any revenue at all and no one's listening to them. This is actually very, very common in the podcast world that people create a podcast and they fizzle out relatively quickly just because no one's actually listening to them. So it's important when picking a topic to find something that you actually care about and that you're passionate about. And that can be really anything. Ours is dealing with, of course, the Wheel of Time books. Not the TV show. There are podcasts now that have come out about the TV show, but about the books themselves. Now, there are several, actually, I think close to 50 different Wheel of Time podcasts out there. When we started, there wasn't this many at all. So the market has definitely become more and more saturated. Does that mean it's oversaturated? Probably not. There's a major TV show coming out. There might be some room there for even more podcasts if that's your thing and you want to create a Wheel of Time podcast. I am not discouraging from that, but I will kind of bring me to the next couple of points. One thing you want it to be is new and refreshing. Finding something that's new and refreshing can often be something that will resonate with listeners. Using something that's tired and worn out sometimes might not. And creating something new that's popular might be, a breath of fresh air or something that someone's looking for, especially if there's nothing else out there for it. Now, I will caution you that if you have a passion about something that's a very, very, very niche and maybe only like 3 people in the world actually understand it or do it, probably not the best podcast topic unless you can make it interesting. If you're going to talk about, I don't know, if you have a passion for collecting paper clips, there might be a group of people out there that's into that, but you might find a hard time finding an audience talking about the different nuances of paper clips. Now, of course, I'm going to an extreme example, and if you are a fan of paper clips, not trying to offend. So, but find something that, like I said, that you're passionate about at the same time that you think there might be a popular audience. You can use Google as a resource for this. Oftentimes, I've used Google as that. You can go to Google Analytics and actually look for what are most searched things. So if you want to find, a topic that's new and hot and it's becoming more popular, sometimes you can find things that people are searching for, people are talking about, but no one's actually creating a medium for this yet. And it's something that you're very, very, excited about or passionate about. By all means, that might be a good topic to create a podcast about. Now, that's another thing, is figuring out how long you want the podcast to run. Sometimes you want to run it forever. It might be something that you just keep on going. It might be an end date. So like for us, we're making our way through a book series. It's going to be a 7-year long podcast. After that, who knows? We might create another one, but it won't be probably on the same topic, or it might be a reread. Who knows? But that's whether or not you're going to have an end date or not, come up with that beforehand, at least to let you kind of set goals around that, and also pacing. Now, if you do pick something that is saturated, that's okay too. Let's say you're really into something like, I don't know, true crime. Now, we all know there's a ton of true crime podcasts out there that kind of invented the podcast genre, or at least that's what made it most popular, is all these true crime podcasts that came up. And if you're passionate about that, by all means, go for it. The one thing I'll caution you on it is be different. Don't just copy something that someone's already done. Or if you're going to copy something, be better. Find a way to create something better than what's already out there. That's really tough to do. Oftentimes, if it's already a thing that's happening and you're not as good as the other person that's doing it, they're going to listen to the other guy, especially if the other guy already has an audience and is already popular. So it's going to be really hard for you to move into that space. But if you have something new, refreshing, something that's different, a different take on something, if you're going to take it from a different approach, by all means, that's a great way to pick a topic. So let's talk about some of those top 10 topics out there. So there are the top 10 podcast topics that people that are the most popular out there. I'll run through each one of those just in case you're thinking about doing one of those, just to kind of let you know those are very popular topics, and it might be an oversaturated market, like I said, but if you have that unique vibe or feel, by all means, go into it. So the top 10 are true crime. Number 2, chat shows like Joe Rogan. Of course, he's the king of podcasts right now. I'm not a big fan of him myself, but a lot of people watch the chat shows, doing interviews, kind of interview style. Number 3, news and current affairs. Number 4 is audio drama. So making your own basically TV show or radio show about a story that you create. And then TV shows, books, and films. So that's kind of all lumped into one, so that talking about other media, whether it's your favorite TV show or your favorite movies or books or whatever. There's a lot of podcasts out there to do that, including us. We fall into that category. Next up would be sports. Tons of sports podcasts out there. The next is the paranormal. A lot of ghost podcasts out there. Then feminism, questions and Mythbusters, and last is food. The most fastest rising actually topic has been music. So that's not on this list, but that's another thing out there that has become really popular and is not super oversaturated, but it's quickly becoming saturated, is to have a music podcast to talk about different aspects of music, or critique them, or actually do first time listens to different types of songs and talk about music. So those are just some ideas just to think about, at least what's popular out there. Of course, if you have an idea that's not on that list, by all means, go towards it. That's just what the most popular topics are at this time. So the last thing I want to talk about with this video is to ask yourself before you pick a topic is, why are you doing this? This is a very, very important question to ask yourself. And it might be, I want to make money. And that's not a bad answer. Don't take that the wrong way. One thing I will caution you, if you let that drive it and not a passion or something else, it sometimes can bleed through, or your audience will feel that. When we started ours, it was just kind of almost as a joke. If you listen to our first couple episodes, they were actually horrible audio quality. We had no idea what we were doing, and it's a big mess. And we've learned a lot over the last year and a half, almost 2 years, of doing this, buying new equipment and learning how to edit and things like that. And I'll talk about that in future how tos. But as far as making money, that was not something we even thought of doing. In fact, I resisted the idea of even having the ability to run ads on my podcast at first, or even doing something like a Patreon, or anything that was to make money on the podcast. I resisted for the longest time. And it wasn't until I sat down with another content creator who makes a lot of money and actually does it full time. He's a YouTuber, but does content creation full time. And I talked with him one-on-one about how I was resistant to it. He said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, I don't want to come across as I'm just trying to make people's take people's money." And he made the really good point to me, saying that, how much time a week are you putting into this thing? And I, started thinking about it. I'm like, well, I record for 2-3 hours once a week, and then I spend probably about 6 or 7 hours recording. Then I, market for another 2 or 3 hours. Then I spend this much time doing this, and then I start, he's like, "So you have a part-time job, right? That you're not getting paid for?" I said, "Yeah, but it's just a hobby, right? You don't have to get paid for a hobby." It's like, "Yeah, but no one's going to be offended if you ask them for money because of what you're doing. They understand you're putting a lot of time and effort into their entertainment. No one's going to fault you for asking for money. Now, they might not listen to you if you require them to pay you. That's another thing that I would highly recommend against or discourage, is requiring payment. Being that exclusive, because probably if no one's heard of you, no one's going to pay you to listen to you. But, as far as asking for money, for something that you're doing, spending a lot of time in, and you're providing a medium for someone, a media that someone's consuming, no one's going to fault you for asking for money, at least if they're a fan of yours and they really like your content. So I would not discourage you from making money. Now, if you want to make it your main thing, that might not be the best way of going about podcasting. I would say there's other ways of doing that. Like I mentioned, YouTube is probably a better way to make money. Now, their algorithms have changed, but podcasting is a lot harder to make money on. But like I said, why do you want to do this? If it's just because, you're really passionate, you want to share this with someone, that was me. I was passionate about these book series. I knew they were making a TV show out of it, and I wanted friends to read the book series with me as I was doing a reread. I didn't have friends who had read the series before. And I started doing a reread and started listening to podcasts while doing a reread. So this was the first time I actually really got into podcasting. I started listening to Wheel of Time podcast. And then my brain started turning. I said, man, maybe I can get some of my friends to do a podcast with me. It'd be a lot of fun. So we did it for fun. I pitched the idea to a few friends, and they said yes. And then, boom, the Wheel Reads was born. So that's how we created it. It was kind of almost accidental, and almost kind of, like I said, not really a joke, but kind of a joke. But I did do a lot of planning and effort into researching before going on. So that's I would say the final thing I would say is research. Research about the topic you're going to talk about. Become an expert on it. You don't have to be the greatest expert on it. Have I read The Wheel of Time more than once? Yeah, I've read it twice now. I'm working on a third time. Am I an expert on The Wheel of Time? No. There are people out there that have read the series 50 times. People that have been reading it since it first came out in the 90s, and just live their lives fully around the series, that are a whole lot more of an expert than I am. When I say research, it doesn't mean necessarily, I said become an expert, but become knowledgeable enough that you don't come across as someone that has no idea what they're talking about, especially if you're going to talk about something that that requires some technical analysis. The other thing I would say is research other podcasts. Now, this is something you have to be careful with. So if you're recreating something, like we're doing a read-through podcast, Once I decided to do a read through podcast, I stopped listening to any read through podcast. Now, I'd listened to them beforehand, but probably about 2 months before we started, I refused to listen to any more read through podcasts, at least on the Wheel of Time. The reason being is because I didn't want that podcast to influence things I would say in my podcast. I didn't want to seem like I was plagiarizing or copycatting. Be very careful and respectful to other content creators. So I wanted to at least put that out there. And just when you research other podcasts, find who the other ones are, and feel free to reach out to them and ask them. A lot of times, content creators are happy to share information about things they do, things they find about the actual community. Whenever there's a new Wheel of Time podcast or YouTuber that shows up, most of them will tell you I reach out to them and try to say, hey, is there any way I can help you out? I don't look at the whole community as competitors. Some people do, and that's okay if you do. I more look at it as ways that we can feed off each other and grow the community as a whole. Really, I just want more people reading these books, so I have more people to talk to about it. So it's really selfish of me, but that's kind of my reason behind it. So, like I said, research. Listen to other podcasts, and then if you find out that your idea is already being done, how can you differentiate yourself from that other podcast? How can you be better than them? That's when they go about the competitive nature. If you're going to do the exact same thing as someone else, what makes you different? What makes you better? You got to raise the bar. Otherwise, they're just going to listen to the other guy. So that's kind of all I have on the podcast topic discussion. Next time I'll kind of go into formatting, how to create a podcast as far as, different styles and different ways of going about it. We talked about the interview approach, the chatting. It's one of the most popular ways. Also, whether to have a co-host or do it alone. All those things in formatting your podcast. I'll do a whole entire video on that next time. But for now, feel free to like and subscribe us. Leave some comments down below. Let me know what you think. If you create your own podcast, let me know, how you guys picked your topic. What stuck out to you guys and why you went down that route. If you're thinking about creating a podcast, feel free to reach out to me in the comments. Ask me questions. I'm happy to answer any you might have. So, but that's all I got for this time. So until next time, peace.